Good evening, everyone. For those of you who are here, for those of you who are on the other side of the screens, and for those who are literally on the other side, because today we have something interesting to talk about. It's one of those lectures where whether you are here as an incarnate being or you are a discarnate being, you're going to be able to relate to it. And we start with this little joke here with Mario, right? And the whole idea is that you have to put together the little guy before you can start playing the video game. So it was one of the first video games where you could build your own character. So this is exactly what we're going to be talking about, the biology organizing model. In other words, what you know as perispirit. The perispirit is the biology organizing model, or BOM, and that is the part in us that is going to build the physical body that we have today. And this is the most important thing that we are going to be discussing, all right, in this lecture. How is it that the perispirit, or the biology organizing model, does this, and what are the implications of this particular type of construction? I'm not going to be focusing on ideas of how what is the science behind it or the details behind it. I'm going to actually give practical aspects, in the sense that if it is done one way, what are the consequences for us while we are here in the physical realm, and so on. Okay, so biology organizing model. The perispirit has been known by so many different names, so many different aliases throughout history, right? But today we are trying to move away from all the other names because they had a religious connotation or very philosophical connotation, and we want to embrace a connotation that is more spiritualist or even spiritist, in the sense of encompassing not only religious beliefs but philosophical and scientific beliefs as well. But before we start talking about its practical aspects, I have divided this talk into two parts. The first part, we are going to be looking at a few concepts that we will need in order to describe the perispirit and its practical aspects in our life. We have a model for the creation, right? If you have already seen some of the other talks that we have given, you're probably familiar already with this model. As a model, it's not the last word on it. It is whatever we understand today, much like we say the Big Bang model. It's whatever we have accumulated in terms of astronomical and astrophysical knowledge, right? But it's not the last word of it. We are constantly renewing, we're constantly updating it. The same thing applies to the model of the creation. We have the creator, and then we have the creation, all right? And within this creation here, we divide this, all right? We divide the creation into two parts, two essential parts, not two halves. It's not divided right in the middle. One has the universal principle that gives rise to the universal fluid, which you probably know as the universal cosmic fluid. We don't need to say universal cosmic fluid because universe and cosmos are roughly the same thing. I particularly prefer universe as opposed to cosmos because universe means in one, right? So in terms of one is Greek, the other one is Latin, universe is more descriptive, right? So the universal fluid gives rise to the material principle. And the material principle, in its turn, gives rise to matter, to energy. And I put a box there so that we don't sound so arrogant that we know everything. This box should actually be even bigger than everything else here, right? Because this is the box that represents what we don't know, our ignorance. Okay? So as simple as that. And then what we have on the other side, okay, of this model, still within the creation, we have the intelligence principle. The principle itself is not intelligent. It's the principle of intelligence. So be very careful, all right? And the intelligence principle is that which gives rise to the spirit, and I don't know if there are other things. Right now, that's all I know. So I put also a question mark over there so that, again, we don't sound so arrogant. In this talk, we are going to be discussing the idea of the spirit associated with human beings, or the body of a human beings. We are not going to go backwards in the biological evolution. So we are not going to be talking about the monad. So this model here, I'm actually presenting to you from a certain point onwards, not the whole thing that we have, right? Just so you get familiar with these things. Very well. Let us just simplify this a little bit. I don't need to have these question marks for now, because if I don't know what they mean, I cannot say anything about them, correct? So let us clean this up, and let us also combine matter and energy into one box, because we know that they are interconvertible. This side of the creation is the side we call material, all right? So energy, matter, this part here is the material part, and this is the part that is quintessential, all right? Now, let me do something. Let us do an experiment. I am going to take two portions of matter. Two portions of matter. Why two? Because I want to make a comparison. Of course, otherwise I wouldn't be picking two. Why not three? Well, because it just makes it more complicated, and with two, it will be enough for me to show what I want to show to you. So, when we go through this part of the diagram here, what you end up with is inanimate matter. Matter that is not capable of being alive, period. Inanimate matter, right? So I took two chunks, two portions of matter. Both of them are inanimate. And I want you to pay attention to this for now. And I'm going to show you something else. From the universal fluid, there is also another type of manifestation called the vital principle. At this point, you're probably asking yourselves, why is it possible that one thing can generate two things that are exactly different, Well, look at yourself in the mirror. You started from one cell. All the information was in that cell. But the cells on your skin are different, even from the cells of the skin of your lips. They are different from the cells on your eyes. They are different from your hair follicles. You have many different variations on a theme, or manifestations from the very same individual single cell you started with. Therefore, it's not so crazy that the universal fluid can manifest itself in two different ways. The vital principle, in the same way, produces the vital fluid. And now here's the interesting thing. If I now take the vital fluid and I combine with inanimate matter, I end up having animated matter. Animated, because I wanted to give the idea, instead of saying animate, I want to say animated with the past participle, because I want to impart the idea that there was an action that had to happen there. So whenever I have the vital principle producing vital fluid, and I combine the vital fluid with inanimate matter, I get animated matter. And why is this animated matter so important? Because the spirit will use animated matter, only animated matter, to produce a perispirit, or the biology organizing model, and the physical body. And then for those of us here in the physical plane, the incarnate beings, as we call ourselves, we are a triad, or a three-part being. We are the spirit. Be careful with the verbs. We are the spirit, but we have a perispirit and we have a physical body, right? If I am now a discarnate being, like some of our brothers and sisters watching this as well, they don't have a physical body, they are just a two-part being. Pretty much as we did before, since we are not going to be working with inanimate matter in this presentation, let us clean this a little bit, okay? Let us just make sure that we get everything that is important for us for our discussion here. So you see the spirit interacting with animated matter, which was put together by vital fluid and the inanimate matter, producing perispirit and physical body, right? When I discarnate, I go to a two-part being. When I incarnate again, I get another physical body, right? Then that physical body perishes, I go back to a two-part being, then I reincarnate again, and I go on and on in this cycle many, many, many times over, all right? Very good. So then, Let us simplify a little more. I'm just crunching because I want to add more and more information, all right? So you notice that I just push everything down. I didn't change anything. Still get the universal fluid. This is the material side of the creation, producing vital principle, material principle. This one produces matter energy. This is the vital fluid. The combination of these two, animated matter, which with the spirit, and only with the spirit, produces perispirit and physical body, right? So then we are going to see some interesting things. First of all, we can draw a line here and separate the creation into two sides. Remember, once again, not two halves, not two equal sides, but two parts only. This is the quintessential non-material, non-physical part of the creation. This is the most difficult part for us to understand because we can't relate to it. I cannot do an experiment. I cannot give you anything here that would be a direct analogy to what it actually is. We always have to refer to it through very indirect, very, in an analogy type of approach. This, on the other hand, all right, I have as the material side of the creation. And in the material side of the creation, I have the universal fluid and everything that comes from this universal fluid. Good? Now, even inside of the materials, the part of the creation, I can divide into this piece here and this one here. It's this division here. And this is the part that gets a little complicated. But we're going to go through it. Because this part here is material only. It's where our perispirit is. This part here is also material. But then just to be able to tell us that there is a little difference between this and this one, still under the material side, we say that this is material and physical. So that we say, because I borrow the physical from saying that we are in the physical world. So our physical bodies are in the physical material part of the universal fluid, as opposed to our perispirit, which is only on the material side. But we can also look at the green and the purple color. We can call this the physical plane. So it's the part that has the material and physical. And we can also call the extra-physical plane. Extra-physical means everything that is not physical. Therefore, the extra-physical takes the material-only side of the creation and the quintessential side. So it's kind of a hybrid there. And this is important because we see all these words a lot in the literature, in the Spiritist literature. So if you're not familiar with these things, we should always have this diagram in the back of our minds. Because if you're not familiar with this nomenclature, we get confused with what we are reading. So the spirit is always quintessential, non-material, non-physical. The material part is the one responsible for the perispirit. And then material and physical is the physical body. Okay? We'll have questions later on. Don't worry about it. All right? So this is very important. And we're going to be using this from now on in this lecture so that we can have an idea of what the perispirit is doing. So let us clean this up for a second. And let us now focus on the first division that we have, the division between the spirit and the perispirit. Like I told you, the spirit is the quintessential part, the non-material, non-physical, all right? So it's very hard for us to create a demonstration because everything that we have here is physical, material and physical. So the only way to do this is by means of an analogy. Because you might be asking, okay, if the spirit is non-physical, non-material, how is it possible for it to create something that is physical or that is material, like the perispirit, right? They interact, correct? So let us use an analogy. And the analogy is the following. Imagine that there is a mirror here and that you step in front of that mirror. You, in physics, we say that you are the object, the real thing. And then when you step in front of the mirror, what is it that you produce? Your reflection. Well, the physicists will say you're an image. You, the spirit, step in front of the mirror, and then you produce an image. The image is your perispirit. So we're going to use this analogy to be able to understand how this is coming to be. Now, what is the mirror? The mirror is nothing more than the universal cosmic fluid. It could be, for instance, a real mirror when you look at it. Or it could be, you know, the serene surface of a lake, of a water pond, all right? A pond where you would look and you would see your reflection there. So the mirror is the representation, in our analogy, of the universal cosmic fluid. So let us see how far we can take this analogy, right? So I'm going to keep this there, but just before, I just want to say one thing. Normally, we would like to look this way. Very nice, right? Round, smooth surface. But the truth is, this is how it look like. A very, somewhat monstrous looking type of, and that is because we are still learning how to manipulate the universal fluid to produce a good image. So we do look like this, if we could say look for the spirit. Since the spirit is not physical, we shouldn't say the word look, but for lack of a better word, let's say look. We look like this, spiritually speaking. And then, of course, our perispirit will resemble, because the mirror is not going to do anything that the object does not have. So let us see the analogy. I'm going to keep this here a second. So if we now use this, there is an object and an image. Well, then there is a spirit and a perispirit, right? With this analogy. The image is the light projection of the object. Very good. So the perispirit is the material projection of the spirit. We continue with the analogy. The image is dependent on the object, right? It means that without the object, there is no image. If I am not in front of the mirror, there is no image of me there. There might be an image of the back of the room and things like that, of the wall, right? But not of myself. If I step away from a mirror, my image disappears. The same thing here. If a perispirit is dependent on the spirit, without a spirit, there is no perispirit. There is another way of saying this. There is no such a thing as an orphan perispirit. If there is a perispirit, there is a spirit associated, right? Because one is dependent on the other. Any variation in position in the image comes from a variation in position from the object. If I go in front of the mirror and I wave and I move my arm and I move my legs, whatever it is, I make a grimace, everything that I do, my image repeats back, right? So it is. Whatever my spirit does, whatever I do, because I am the spirit, my perispirit copies. All right? This is very important. So the perispirit has no mind of its own. The mind is in the spirit. It's in the object, not in the image. So you see what we are doing here. With the simple analogy, we are trying to push as much as we can, all right? Trying to understand this concept between the two. And an image, even when you step in front of the mirror, I know that you cannot go there and grab it, right? If you try to grab it, you just bump your hand on the mirror. But that image is material, and I'm going to prove it to you. If you are in front of the mirror and you turn off the lights, you no longer have your image. It requires light, which is energy. But remember that energy and matter were on the same side of the creation, the material side? So the image is material. Therefore, the spirit is non-material in this analogy, but the perispirit is. Because it's on this side of the creation that is part of the universal fluid, therefore material. Most important points to take from here is the fact that the perispirit is dependent on the spirit, that the mind is in the spirit, not in the perispirit. It's very, very important that we keep that in mind. Which means we have to keep it in our spirits, right? So now it comes to the next question. If now I am the spirit and I look this ugly and I want to look this way, right? And when I go and I produce this perispirit, which is all distorted, how is it possible for me to go from here to here? Through reincarnation processes. And then the question becomes a simple one: how? And this is where the biology organizing model is going to help us to understand, to ascertain how it's possible, how it's possible for us through multiple reincarnation processes to move from a situation like this to something that looks like that. So now what we are going to do is look at the other one, at the other interface, the interface between perispirit and physical body. We saw first this one over here, between the spirit and the perispirit. Now it's between the biology organizing model and the physical body. I'll just stop this little guy because it's really going at it with gusto, right? So this is basically what it does. And this is why it's called the biology organizing model, because it builds the physical body that we have. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, what you are seeing is a physical body, but it was a physical body that was put together by your perispirit, your biology organizing model. And when it did that, it's because your spirit, this is what your spirit knows how to carve. It doesn't know how to carve anything better. This is why we have what we have. And this is why, to tie together with what we are seeing today, all right, that number one, the first lesson that we studied today, that we have to be grateful for everything that we have. And the second one, that we should always proceed with the utmost confidence in all our duties, because they are ours. We were the ones that designed them. There you have it. My spirit produced an image of myself, which is as good or bad according to my moral intellectual background, my development. And now that image, the perispirit, is creating a template for my physical body, is acting as a biology organizing model, a model that will organize the future biological entity I am going to use as a tool to improve myself. And this is what this passage here, when we acquire a new physical body, we build a new physical body, and then we reincarnate, is called the reincarnation. So when we look at that, right, now that we have all of these words, all of these concepts put together, let us come to the practical aspects, right? And I have chosen to discuss 3 disease states. Don't worry, it's not going to be a morbid thing, all right? Actually, the whole thing is a lesson in hope, all right? A lesson in gratitude. So don't be sidetracked by that. I will not give a lot of scientific background. I'm just going to give a very little information, just so that you don't get sidetracked, that you know what we are talking about. Okay? Then you might be asking me, why is it that you chose these 3 particular diseases, all right? Pulmonary emphysema, thalassemias, and Down syndrome. I could have chosen other things. Well, it doesn't matter which disease you pick. It's just that these are prevalent. And as I describe, you will see that they all are somewhat linked, not biologically or in a disease-related way, but linked in the sense of the explanation. So it's a lot easier with these 3. And I divided them into 2 big groups. I'm going to take only one as a non-genetic disease, and 2 that are genetically inherited. In other words, these you are born with or you are not. Okay? You don't develop these things, all right, after, later in life. But pulmonary emphysema, you can. And this is how we start with pulmonary emphysema. So, let's be quick about it. The human body, the lungs, okay? And if you go and you can look it under the microscope, you will see that the lungs look like sponge, right? If you ever touched a lung, you will see, it feels like the sponge that we use to clean the dishes. They're very, very soft. Very, very soft indeed. And it has this squishy sound if you try to press it. Now, that's because if you could actually see, when you look at this, you think it's a smooth surface, but it's actually made of tiny, tiny, tiny balloons called alveoli, or alveolus for one of them. And in these little sacs, in these little spheres, is where the oxygen goes into the bloodstream and the carbon dioxide is expelled, which is then exhaled through our nose and mouth. Okay? So the interesting thing is the following. In pulmonary emphysema, these little sacs, these little spheres, they get damaged by inflammatory responses. Okay? And once they get damaged, they are eventually destroyed, and you start losing the ability to breathe. You can still pull air in through your nose. It's not that. But you cannot exchange. You cannot move the air that you breathe, all right, into your bloodstream to oxygenate your body. So if it becomes too severe, if you have too many of these that are damaged, eventually you compromise your ability to breathe and to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. That's your pulmonary emphysema. Why so important? Because pulmonary emphysema you can get, all right, you can develop later in life. You are not born with pulmonary emphysema. But for instance, you can get by smoking, or by working in a mine, or in a company that does ore smelting or processing, metal processing, right? Because tiny particulates that are in the air or in the smoke of your cigarette or any tobacco-based product will go in and damage these little sacs. So let's look at now what happens between perispirit and physical body when we have a pulmonary emphysema. And I'm going to represent it here 4 different aspects, 4 different ways that the same disease can take, 4 different courses that the disease can take. When we look here in the first row, all these patients are going to die from that disease, death from the disease, here. Here, they are going to have a recovery from that disease. They will recover from pulmonary emphysema. In the first column is a negative outlook on the disease, meaning the patient here, while it is going through the disease process, is a very negative, very destructive individual. Is always complaining and complaining and complaining. Here, it will be a patient that will be, practicing active resignation. We'll try to do every treatment that is available, we'll try to take every medication that is available, we'll try to do his or her best, all right, to get a cure for it. But we'll always be exercising the active resignation. In other words, if this is not my time to get a cure, I will still be grateful for whatever I get. All right? The same thing, now we're going to have here the positive outlook. So these are the negative, and this is the positive. So now let us see one at a time. Scenario number 1, patient shows no resignation, is irritable, is angry, is frustrated, has a very destructive approach. This is the patient from hell, right? Is the person that you get close, or even what is a family member that is in a home or in a hospital. Getting next to this individual it's problematic because the person is always in that horrible mood, all right? So in this particular case, right, the person is not being helpful. Now, remember that all the patients shown here, they are death. They are going to die from the disease. So in this case, what is happening? Remember when we discussed about the vital fluid? And we said that the vital fluid with inanimate matter becomes animated matter. And that is what we use for our physical bodies and for our perispirit. In this case, the patient is going to die, the physical body, of course, because it's only the physical body that dies, because the vital fluid will be depleted by the disease. Because there is no more vital fluid, it doesn't matter what we do. We cannot animalize that body anymore, that physical body. No more vital fluid, the physical body falls apart. It returns to inanimate matter. All right? So in this particular case, the physical body is going to perish. But here's the interesting thing. Remember that this was the recalcitrant, stubborn, annoying, right? Patient, the person that never got a constructive view on the disease, well, his or her perispirit is not repaired. Not repaired because the individual never learned anything from that moment of difficulty in the physicality. So in this case, we say it is medically a negative statistics and spiritually also negative, because the individual died. For earthly medicine, that's a bad thing to count. It's a dead patient. But also, when that individual returns to the spirituality, he never did take any of the opportunities that were offered during the disease to improve himself, to improve herself. So it's a negative on both sides. Look at the difference now when we get a patient that is showing resignation, understanding, faith. It doesn't mean the patient is not suffering. It's suffering. It doesn't mean the patient is not crying or sometimes even screaming in pain. It's doing all of that if necessary. But it's a patient that does not blame anything or anyone, and much less the Creator. It's a patient that, okay, I'm going through this, what else can I do? I'll try every possible medication, every possible treatment. If I don't get it, I don't get it. It's going to be sad. I'm going to miss when I leave this world, but this is how it is. So in this case, vital fluid depletion leads to the death of that physical body, much like this one. But in this case, because the individual showed this resignation, because the individual took the time to know himself, herself during that disease process, which allowed for a great amount of introspection, right? The individual's perispirit is now repaired. So here, it's still a medically speaking, it's still a negative statistics, but spiritually, it's positive. Because when that individual returns to the spirituality, that perispirit no longer carries that problem with it. This person here goes back to the spirituality, all right, and remains in that state. In a future reincarnation, this individual here, as it is carving its new physical body, will imprint upon that new physical body all the issues that were left pending from the previous life, which is, in this case, a propensity, an inclination to pulmonary diseases. It doesn't have to be the exact same disease, all right? So look at the difference. They're both medically negative statistics, but depending on how we behave, we have a complete different outcome spiritually. Let us see now when there is a recovery from the disease. This is a tricky one, the one over here, okay? There was still no resignation. This is the irritable patient. This is the frustrated patient, the angry patient, the patient from hell, as we would say. It's still a very destructive approach to the infirmity throughout the whole process. However, here's the catch. The individual had enough vital fluid left when the disease started to accomplish a physical recovery. So this individual here actually is medically a positive statistics. The individual gets a cure. But look carefully, because spiritually it is not. Which means that this individual in the same lifetime can still redevelop that disease, or in a future lifetime, because the perispirit is still damaged. The perispirit still has the bad mold, the bad frame, the bad blueprints. This individual will bring the inclination to a disease that is very similar, that is related to this one. Because this individual did not learn through that process. Was always recalcitrant, always stubborn, always very angry at everything. Finally, the best scenario possible, right? When the individual shows resignation and has enough vital fluid to be cured here in this lifetime during this reincarnation process. Here, the perispirit is repaired because the individual went through the disease process and allowed himself, herself, to embrace every step of the way all right? And also to understand what was going on. This is medically positive, and it's also spiritually positive. So here you have an absolute cure in this lifetime, and you're not going to have it on a future one, because you have solved whatever aggravated your perispirit, whatever was wrong in your initial blueprints when you put together that physical body. So this is very important for us to understand. Whenever we deal with any sort of disease, any sort of difficulty, to see this difference between the perispiritual side and the physical body's side. If we understand that our physical body and the contingency around us they were all put together by ourselves, by our perispirits, we need then to take care of whatever is going on, so that when we return to the spirituality, whether we died because of that disease or died because of those circumstances, when we return to the spirituality, we are always going to be a positive spiritual statistics. In other words, our perispirit, our biology organizing model, will have a better blueprint for the future body. Because if we don't, if you still have the same blueprint, we are still struggling with the same issues over and over again. Okay? All right. Let us see now genetically inherited diseases. All right? Thalassemias. Thalassemias are a dysfunction in one or more genes that produce the globins, that create the hemoglobin. This is a pictorial, it's a sketch of the hemoglobin molecule. And you see this tiny little thing there inside in green? That's an oxygen molecule. When you breathe and you say, oh, I breathe oxygen, I need oxygen to live, you have this monstrous molecule just to carry the tiny little thing right there in the middle. And there's another part that you don't see because it would be here on top of it. You wouldn't be able to see the oxygen. And that's the oxygen binding and releasing, binding and being released. So when we breathe, in our lungs it binds, and then when it goes all the way to our cells, it releases the oxygen. Whenever there is any genetic control that affects this whole carrier or a part of it, it's a thalassemia. That's all we need to know, right? And that this is genetically inherited. You don't develop this later in life. You're born with it, right? And depending, there are gradations. It can be very serious or just mild. But here's an interesting thing, just so you have an idea of how small this thing is compared to what is used to carry it. Are you familiar with 747-300? Think of Air Force One. Now imagine Air Force One with the president inside, but no pilot, no one to serve him, just the president. So the president's mass, body mass, is the mass for the oxygen molecule. The whole plane, packed, loaded, is the mass of the hemoglobin molecule. So the body produces this enormous thing just to carry one person, which has to be the pilot at the same time. Okay? Because if you put it the pilot, there are two people there. Right? This is just to give you an idea of the proportions. Okay? But now, let us look back to this diagram. Here, in the negative outlook of the disease, right? We don't have enough vital fluid. If it happens in this case, then the individual will perish. If it is a disease that is taken to an extreme, the individual will perish. So it will be a negative statistics, medically speaking. But during the process, this individual was always recalcitrant. Once again, was always angry, always annoyed. So spiritually was also a negative statistics, in the sense that that individual did not embrace the body that he or she put together for that reincarnation. God does not put together our physical bodies. We do. We do based on what we did in all our past lives. We can't blame anybody else. We're the ones that write the blueprint, we're the ones that read the blueprint, and we're the ones that carve and do everything on it. We don't have a contract. We don't hire anyone. So we cannot throw stones at anything or anyone. So in this situation, perispirit is not repaired, right? On this side, on the other hand, the individual still died because there wasn't enough vital fluid for that physical body to acquire a cure, to develop a cure right here on this reincarnation. But the individual was more, showed more resignation, was more understanding, more faithful. So although it's a negative, medically speaking, it's a negative statistic, spiritually, the perispirit was repaired. So the new blueprint for a new reincarnation will no longer carry these issues, right? Now let us see if there is recovery from the disease. Well, these are genetically inherited diseases. That's the big difference. No physical recovery. So either you die of something else, or you will die of this disease, all right? But you will spend your entire life with this disease. So you see that this is different here now. So that's why I wanted to compare this with the pulmonary emphysema. First, the pulmonary emphysema is something that we can bring upon ourselves by bad habits. This one, you were born with it in a way. And we're going to come to that at the end. Don't worry about it. The point here is no physical recovery. So let us look again, what is going on? On this side, my perispirit, and you see that it's going to be a little white. Okay? And this one on the grayish side. So this is a sad moment, right? I go through my entire life with something that is debilitating me, correct? But doesn't matter. Because my perispirit, imagine, is taking snapshots of everything that I do. This is why, if this perispirit now, my perispirit, is taking snapshots, even though I am sad, debilitated by the disease, but I am showing resignation, showing an understanding, I will later on use these snapshots to improve the new blueprints for my new physical body. If, on the other hand, it is sad, but on top of everything, I'm angry, frustrated, recalcitrant, annoying to everyone around me, then the snapshots will show that type of behavior. And these snapshots I will not be able to use to improve upon my blueprints. So even though there is no physical cure, right, I can still do something positive about it. Let us look at one more, and that'll be it. Down syndrome. We get one chromosome from the father, one chromosome from the mother. So our cells have our chromosomes in pairs, right? When we have Down syndrome, during the formation of that new cell, unfortunately for chromosome 21, instead of having one from the father and one from the mother, we end up with 2 and 1. So we end up with 3. It's called a triad, or a trisomy of chromosome 21. This produces particularly a form of slow mental development, right? Impairment for certain intellectual abilities, and so on. So it's the same thing that we saw before, right? Here, if the individual is recalcitrant, is not happy, is not helping the entire process, the perispirit is not repaired. So the individual will eventually perish either from the disease, complications generated by the disease. You don't necessarily die of Down syndrome. You die of complications of, especially liver complications or kidney complications because of the disease, but not of the disease directly. But you're going to die because you're not going to have enough vital fluid. It's going to be depleted, like it will be depleted for all of us. When we expire, when this physical body expires, it's because our vital fluid is no longer there, right? And it will be a negative statistics both spiritually and medically because the individual was not cooperative. On the other hand, an individual that is cooperative, right, still goes through all the difficulties, all right? The perispirit is repaired. In this case, we have a positive for the spiritual part. Once again, it's a genetically inherited disease. Right now, we have no cure for such things. So in this case, no physical recovery. Here, it's not a question of just being a sad thing like the thalassemias. Just to give you an idea, all right? Thalassemias happen 1 in 20 individuals. So one person in this room has thalassemia, because we have more than 20 people here. Or there's a great probability that one of us, okay, has thalassemia. But they have mild forms and very intense forms, very strong forms, all right? But in this case here, it's not just an unhappy coincidence, an unhappy stance. Here, you really are weighed down heavily because of this particular type of genetically inherited disease. It doesn't matter. Our perispirit, the perispirit of this individual, is taking the snapshots of everything that is being done throughout the reincarnation process. So if this individual is now cooperative, is showing resignation throughout the process, this individual here will be changing its perispirit for a future reincarnation process. Okay? Well, you might be asking, oh, that is something wrong about this situation, right? Because if you are now slow, right, intellectually speaking, if you have some sort of a retardation, how is it possible for you to cooperate or not cooperate? Cooperate or not cooperate? Well, who said that what we do is in the physical body or the perispirit? Didn't I make it very clear at the very beginning that everything is in the mind? And in the gospel, there is this beautiful passage that says that a spirit who is calm and gentle, even in the body of a giant, will be a gentle giant, will be a calm, will be a serene individual. And one who is bellicose, who's angry, even if you put in a deformed body, will still show the anger. The only thing is that the anger may be limited to what the body can express, but it will still be angry. All right? If you give a hammer to a little one, they can do a lot of damage. All right? Even though they don't have the strength of an adult. What we are seeing is the same thing here. The spirit of this individual who is now partially obstructed, partially blocked of manifesting every possible emotion, the spirit of this individual does not have the syndrome, does not have the disease. The spirit has no disease, right? So depending on that spirit, it can be completely non-cooperative or cooperative. All right? And the perispirit will be taking pictures of everything that that physical body does, because that is its main job once the spirit has gone all the way through to the reincarnation process. The perispirit first is the constructor, right? The foreman. And once we reincarnate, it's the filmmaker. It's just taking the pictures and the photographs of everything that we do. So this is why we have to be very careful. This resignation, this understanding, this faith is in the spirit. We should always remember that. So it is possible for this individual to be cooperative. And this is also why we have, if we are not in this situation, and today these individuals can live very well into their 60s, all right? Because there's therapy, there's different types of help that they can use, that they can live a fulfilling life, an independent life as well. So now, if we are always like this, complaining, moody, angry, guess what is going to show up in our pictures? You're not going to show up smiling. On the other hand, if you do it this way, if you live your life with a fulfilling smile, right? If you live your life in terms of always being positive about the difficulties, because we all have difficulties. Difficulties that we built in our physical body through our perispirit, okay? So that we could actually overcome them, right? So if we now live our lives this way, with that smile, Doesn't mean that we are not going to feel pain. Doesn't mean that we are not going to cry every now and again, that we're not going to even scream every now and again, but it means we're not going to blame anything or anyone. That's the main point. So if now I live it this way, the pictures that I will see later on will be happy ones. Okay? So then, as I run out of vital fluid, as my physical body runs out of vital fluid, it perishes. It's the only thing that perishes, because the perispirit does not perish, right? So as I discarnate and I move myself all the way to that side, remember the one taking the pictures or making the movie? Now it becomes a foreman. It's now a construction site. Now everything that I do on the other side is the building of the new physical body for my future, my next reincarnation. So now this blueprint is the sum of all those snapshots that my perispirit took of my physical body, is the sum of all the movies that I made of my physical body for my previous reincarnation. So this blueprint is now a reflection of everything that I did in my previous life. If I try to be cooperative, if I try to be understanding, it's going to be a great blueprint, and I'll be making a much better physical body. If I was always angry, always nasty, it's not going to be a nice one. All right? So what we are going to see is that as we progress morally and intellectually, we start like this. Remember, if it's white, it's my perispirit. So it's slightly to this side, all right? Sorry, I couldn't find a picture that would fit a little bit more to the other side. So at first, we can barely recognize a human body, right? Oh, this is a joke there. But then we start carving better and better bodies for ourselves as we improve ourselves morally, intellectually, as we learn to cope with the difficulties. Difficulties, once again, that we built into our physical bodies. And eventually, and hopefully, not only will be able to carve something as nice as this, but something a little more artistic, like that one. Okay? But that's the whole point. This is just an analogy, all right? This is just a little cartoonish way of approaching this whole idea that we are always carving a better physical body, provided that we be cooperative in every reincarnation process. This is just before, okay? Just before the reincarnation, when we're putting together the body that we are going to use. All right? So when we talk about the reincarnation, the discarnation, we see that it's a cycle. Right? We die from this side, go to that side, new blueprints with the new blueprints with new physical body. New physical body, we live, we experience the world with the way we treat the experiences. We eventually have another blueprint with a new blueprint, a new physical body, and on and on and on in a cyclic way until we are capable of making that beautiful statue that I showed you before. Good? So to summarize, where is the divine justice in all this? Especially when we talk about diseases, right? Whenever we talk about diseases, we go nuts. We wanted to, oh, why is it that I'm suffering? Why is it that I have to go through this? And it's not a problem to ask the question. The problem is when we decide we get angry, especially at the Creator. We forget that the Creator only gave us the opportunity to reincarnate. The Creator did not tell us how to build our physical bodies. We build it the way we know how to build. So whatever defect we come with, right? If I look at myself and I don't see a Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, that's my fault. All right? Now, of course, we're not talking about physical beauty here. We're talking about moral and intellectual development put together, all right? Let us not forget that. So here is where divine justice resides. For those of us who eventually forget, or every now and again needs a refresher, we all do, all right? So on this side, folks, we are only ignorant. On this side, we don't make any mistakes. We're just ignorant. It is here that we learn. It is here that we experience the creation at this time, all right, in our history, in our evolution. And because it is here that we do our learning, it is here that we progress, that we develop, this is where we make the mistakes. We don't make the mistakes on this side. I don't come and I reincarnate because my spirit had a spat with the spirit of another person in the spiritual realm. I don't come and reincarnate because my perispirit and the perispirit of another person had a particular disagreement. I do it here. This is where I manifest everything that I am, everything that I represent. My essence is manifested on this side. This is the side where I learn. So my mistakes as well are here. Not only that, here my suffering is independent. On this side, my suffering is dependent. What do I mean by that? Once I put together a particular physical body for myself and I reincarnate, if I now bring with that physical body certain genetically inherited diseases, or I have certain inclinations that later on by misbehavior I transform into a disease, like the pulmonary emphysema. Nobody comes with pulmonary emphysema. But you may come from a past life with a propensity, an inclination for it, and then on this life you continue to smoke the same way that you smoked in the past one, right? Or you do something else that will also cause the development of that disease. So once I have a physical body put together by me, I am the one suffering, and it's a dependent suffering because it depends on that physicality that I built. It depends on that physicality. And because I cannot just change physicalities like we change clothes, right? I am stuck with it. So it's dependent. Why independent? If you have ever been to a mediumship meeting, a fraternal assistance meeting, where instead of doing fraternal assistance to incarnate beings, you do it for discarnate beings. So basically you have a medium, all right? Just for simplicity, you have a medium, and in front of the medium you have a dialoguer or a spiritual counselor, all right? So now the medium is receiving a communication of a suffering spirit. And sometimes they come and they tell you things such as, oh, my body, you see, don't you see my body is in decomposition. Oh, don't you see my body, I don't have a leg, or I had this gash, or my heart, I think my heart exploded. All of these things, right? As the counselor, the spiritual counselor, talks to that spirit, poof, it goes away. There's no more heart that exploded. Not in all cases, of course, but if that spirit can listen to the counselor, to the spiritual counselor, if you manage to calm that individual down, it stops suffering. It's independent because here there is no physical body. So you might ask, why was it complaining that the heart had exploded, or there was no leg or no arm or this or that? Because the mind had taken that last picture of the traumatic event of the last reincarnation and kept reliving it. The moment that the spiritual counselor, with love, with care, with kindness, talks that individual out of that constant recall, the individual no longer has any basis, because there is no such a thing as to create pain. No physicality, you can't have physical pain. So in this case, the suffering is independent. But then why do I still say independent suffering as opposed to no suffering? Because now that individual may say, oh, my heart exploded because, for instance, I shot myself. I committed suicide. I don't have a leg because I threw myself in front of a train and things like that. So now there's still a suffering, but the suffering on this side is then emotional in nature. It is no longer associated with the physicality. And being emotional is in the mind, and being in the mind is up to the spirit at any time to get rid of it. Whereas here, for as long as I have that physical body in that diseased state, I will have to undergo all the difficulties that the disease brings to me, that the illness brings to me. So this is the difference between the two sides. But there's one other interesting point I want to make, which I left from a slide, a few slides back. There is determinism here, and there is no determinism here. Indeterminism is not necessarily fatalism, but somewhat. In the sense that here, once I put that physical body together, all right, that's what I have to work with during my reincarnation. Now, I say determinism between quotes because it doesn't mean that whatever the body cannot give me, I have to go through. No. For instance, the pulmonary emphysema. If I come to this life with an inclination to develop pulmonary diseases, but then I don't smoke, I do my best not to work in situations where that will bring me to breathe in particulates. If I try, instead of anything that is related to inhalation of powders and so on, I move away from it, I may not develop. So the determinism is in the sense that that physical body has the inclination. I will not be able to get rid of it. The inclination is there. There's nothing I can do about the inclination. But I may avoid developing the illness. All right? Look at now determinism from the genetically inherited diseases point of view. Is there determinism? Here a little stronger, right? Because I come with that particular genetic disorder. That one I cannot cover up, right? But I still have the ability to go through whatever lifespan that I have, 5 years, 50 years, whatever it is, I still have choice of going throughout that particular illness with a cooperative, positive, constructive approach. Meaning that in the future, the blueprint that I'll have will be much better than the one I used for this reincarnation. So we have to be very careful with the word determinism here, so that we don't think that, oh, okay, I did not win the lottery, I got this bad body. Okay, not my fault. No, it's not a question of fault. Remember, once again, we put together our physical bodies. We do that based on our moral and intellectual development. If we don't do a good job because we don't know better, that's what we have to deal with. And the reason why we get so frustrated is because we compare ourselves to others. Oh, I'm not that beautiful, I'm not that tall, I'm not this, I'm not that healthy, I'm not that athletic. But if we could just look at ourselves, we would be grateful for what we have and be a little more cooperative with ourselves first and foremost. On this side, no determinism. Because there's no physicality here. Here, anything that I decide to change, poof, because who is the part, or what is the part that changes something? The mind, the spirit, the essence, right? All I have to do is, the moment that I change my mind, all I have to do is step in front of the mirror, my perispirit, which is my mirror image, but now material, my perispirit immediately incorporates that. I have no problem. The perispirit is very malleable. It changes very quickly, not the physical body. So on this side, no determinism. Anytime I decide on something on this side, my perispirit will immediately take whatever that I'm incorporating, good or bad, and show. This is why I say, even throughout an illness, a disease state, if now my mind is positive, right? My mind is positive. As Francisco Xavier used to say, my physical body is sick, My spirit is not. My physical body is getting blind. My perispirit, my spirit is not blind, right? So whatever we decide on this side, even if my physical body during a reincarnation cannot cope with, cannot follow, it's not a problem. That will be in the future the positive statistics in the spirituality, because my perispirit will have been changed for the better. We'll have now a much better blueprint. So when we see particularly the determinism and the non-determinism, now let me just remind you all of one tiny little thing. That, okay, it may look like that this side here is the bad side, right? It's where we learn. This is not where we have the break, right? The break is here. So this is the school. This is the homework, the school, everything that we don't like. The spring break is on this side, correct? The chit-chat, the idle time, it's all on this side, the nice thing. Determinism is here. This is where we have the diseases. This is where if I start with a disease or an illness, I have to go through it, vital fluid or not, I have to finish with it. But let me remind you of just one tiny little thing that must convince you of divine justice. This is the temporary side. Everything that we know of that is perishable is here. Will come to pass. And this is the eternal side. This is the side that will be forever. May have had a beginning, but will never have an end. My spirit, I, the spirit, and my perispirit, we will go on forever. Perhaps we'll watch the last light of the last star go blink into complete darkness, and then we will be the only things illuminating and enlightening the whole universe, the whole creation. It doesn't matter. The point is that this is the side that is eternal. The side that represents the difficulties, the illnesses, the bad times, is the one that is temporary. And not only temporary, we always have the idea, the opportunity to come back and change it, make it better. We always cycling between the two, so that we always have a little bit of a break, a respite on this side, like a little break before we come back again to this side. So every time we cycle, whatever we bring to this side is always better. So when we look at all of this, we see now the practical aspects of the biology organizing model, that it's the template for our physical body based on the mind, which is ourselves, the spirit, the quintessential that represents us. And we now know that as we go through the difficulties of this side, that they will always be temporary, because they were imparted. And you know why they are temporary here? Because they were created by us. The spirit was created by God, by the Creator. But we are the ones who create the physical bodies. We don't have the knowledge to create something that is eternal. We don't have the ability, which is great, because otherwise we would be suffering forever. So this is in essence the template, the idea, and also a message of hope. A hope that whatever we go through right now is part of the process of learning, morally, intellectually. That we put together the process ourselves, so that we could, for the next time around, be better, have better blueprints, have a better biology organizing model for the future physical body. Okay? Thank you.